Part of my public engagement work has been to train Muslims in astronomy to see if they can observe the moon in the UK. And you know what? We can.
People might not be aware, actually there's a law on the UK statute book that we should have a fixed date of Easter as soon as the churches can agree. But the churches have never managed to agree.
So the idea is you're going to go out, you're going to look for the moon. You might see it, you might not, but when you do see it, you're going to feel incredible. Many times I've seen people cry tears of joy when they've seen the moon.
Hello, I'm Seb Falk. I am a historian of science and I'm a fellow of Girton College.
Hi, my name's Imad Ahmed. I'm a PhD candidate in the University of Cambridge's Faculty of Divinity, and I'm also associated with Queen's College, Cambridge University.
So we're here talking about the Islamic and Christian calendars on the occasion that this year, exceptionally, Ramadan and Lent almost precisely coincide. So we should warn you, there's going to be a bit of talk about calendars in the course of this conversation. Lent is the 40 days leading up to Easter. In fact, it's actually more like 46 days because of the extra Sundays. And Easter is defined as the first Sunday after the first full moon on or after the spring equinox. And because Easter falls on or soon after the full moon, Lent starts around about the new moon, depending on when the Sunday is. And what about the Islamic calendar, Imad?
So the Islamic calendar is quite a unique calendar in the world. It's a lunar visibility calendar. Each month begins with the physical sighting of the new crescent moon. Now the lunar phases take about 29.5 days to complete. Now a month, of course, can't be 29.5 days long. So the Islamic calendar resolves this by having approximately half the months of the year having 29 days, and the other half of the year having 30 days. And so how Muslims operate the calendar is at the 29th of every single calendar month, they'll go out and look for the new crescent. But if the new crescent moon is not seen, they'll round up to 30 days. And in terms of, for example, Ramadan, people will be going out to look for the moon because it is the moon that will commence the month of fasting. And if they see the moon at the end of the month, it will also mean that our fast has come to a close. In fact, the crescent moon at the end of Ramadan in many Asian cultures is known as Chandrat, which means the night of the crescent. It's a night associated with night markets, night bazaars, last minute shopping, because Eid is about to come. So it's kind of like last minute Christmas shopping, but last minute crescent shopping, if you like. So it's a crescent visibility calendar, and it's a very living calendar. It's a very socially alive calendar because you actually have to go out and sight the moon every single month for it to really work.
That's really interesting. And there's a clear contrast with the Christian calendar there, where the full moon, which gives us the date of Easter, is a kind of theoretical full moon. It's a calculated full moon, but it doesn't necessarily have to be on exactly the same day as the actual full moon. Whereas you're saying that in Islam, observation is really key.
It's absolutely key. I actually tell people it's not a lunar calendar, it's a lunar observation calendar. And this to me is one of my favorite facts about the Islamic calendar. Very traditionally, the rules of the calendar were that if you can't see the moon on the 29th, even due to cloud cover, then you should round up to 30 days. And so I love the fact that even the weather is coded into the calendar, even the fact that maybe somebody's got poor eyesight and on that occasion they couldn't see the moon. That is part of the unfolding of the calendar every single month. So it's an observational calendar, but it's also a social calendar as well. It's a community calendar. And I feel it keeps the community connected to the cosmos because you have to look every single month. And it also means that when we do see the moon, it's a really joyous occasion at the end of the month. In fact, the Arabic word for crescent is hilal. And etymologically, the word hilal is related to the Arabic word to scream or to shout out in joy. And this is actually related to an older Hebrew root where we get the same root for the word hallelujah, which means to sing or to praise in joy of God. So the idea is you're going to go out, you're going to look for the moon. You might see it, you might not, but when you do see it, you're going to feel incredible. And it is a joyous occasion. And many times I've seen people cry tears of joy when they've seen the moon.
And people will see the moon differently in different places in the world. So there might not be complete agreement about when Ramadan starts.
That's right. One of the features of the Islamic calendar is that it's a local calendar. We all experience sunset locally differently everywhere on Earth. So it's perfectly natural, normal, and scientific that one part of the world might see the moon and therefore start Ramadan, and another part of the world would not see the moon and therefore not start Ramadan. And I remember my whole life growing up, would phone my cousins who live in Bangladesh, and they would be celebrating Eid on a different day to us. And that would be perfectly ordinary for Muslims growing up in different countries, because there's an understanding that the calendar is a local calendar based on our local astronomical phenomena.
I mean, obviously, one thing that people will notice about Ramadan is that whether it's 29 or 30 days, it also moves through the calendar year. Unlike Easter, which, although it does move backwards and forwards, is always in March or April. And I guess that's because the Muslim 12 months of 29 and a half days add up to 354, not 365 or 366. And so every year Ramadan gets about 11 days earlier in the calendar.
Yeah, that's right. So every year, in comparison to the solar calendar, the lunar visibility calendar will shift. So when I was younger, maybe a decade ago, I remember Ramadan being in the summer. And because the fasts take place during daylight hours, the fasts were very long, 17 or 18 hours. But every single year now, the months of Ramadan are shifting 10, 11 days earlier and earlier. And now we're moving into winter, so the fasts are very short. So one of the features of the Islamic calendar is every single month will experience all of the seasons. We have a summer Ramadan and a winter Ramadan, and that entire cycle will take about 33 years.
That's a really interesting contrast with the Christian calendar, the lunar Islamic calendar, and the Christian calendar, which has this kind of combined lunar-solar character, which comes out of the really interesting history of Christianity, because Christianity as a religion was founded under the Roman Empire, and Julius Caesar reformed the Roman calendar in 46 BC and created a solar calendar. But because the most important feast in the Christian year was a commemoration, a celebration of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, and Jesus was, of course, Jewish, and so they had to be commemorating this event that took place at the Feast of Passover, which is timed at the full moon in the Hebrew month of Nisan, the spring full moon. They wanted to commemorate that. But there was a huge amount of disagreement, first of all, about what year they were in the cycle, and how long it had been since the crucifixion of Jesus. And then secondly, there was a lot of disagreement about predicting the lunar cycle. And whereas in the Islamic calendar, it was really important to observe things, and really important for each individual, as far as possible, to observe things for themselves, in the Christian calendar, there was a lot more emphasis on everybody doing the same thing, and authority, and an authorized and a well-communicated calendar to make sure that everybody was worshipping, everybody was performing the rites in the same way. And that's really tricky, because you need to be able to predict mathematically when these things are happening. And so various theories, various models were proposed and were argued for to enable that calculation to take place. But basically it's an impossible calculation, because the lunar cycle and the solar cycle, which are based on the movements of the sun and the moon in the sky relative to our position in the universe, are incommensurable. They don't match up. So the length of a solar year is not a precise multiple of the length of a lunar month. And so it then means basically you need to have a model, an approximation, which is as good as it possibly can be. And the approximation of the length of the solar year in terms of Earth days has varied over time and has been updated and reformed. And likewise, there were lots of arguments about precisely when to place the new moons and the full moons in the Christian calendar, in order that Christians could all celebrate Easter on the same day.
Well, that's incredible. And what struck me was some of the attempts to resolve something which is incommensurable, the lunar calendar and the solar calendar. And for the Islamic world, the spiritual practices are based on a lunar calendar or lunar visibility calendar, but that doesn't mean that a solar calendar wasn't important. A solar calendar is very important. It's very important for seasons, it's very important for harvests and therefore taxes. And how Muslims have tended to resolve this is simply to have multiple concurrent calendars. A lunar calendar for religious life, religious worship, sometimes civic and administration activities, but a solar calendar as well. So for example, a very famous Persian calendar is known as the Jalali calendar. It's a solar calendar and a version of it is still used today in various parts of the world. It was created by the famous Muslim astronomer and poet and mathematician and all-round polymath Umar Khayyam. And the Jalali calendar is a solar calendar which is actually more accurate to the sun than the current Gregorian calendar, in that it loses a day every 5,000 years or so. So it has a leap year every 5,000 years or so. We have a leap year every 4 years in the Gregorian calendar. I can't remember the number, but approximately every 3,000 years there's another leap year added for that resolution. So Muslim communities around the world historically have been accustomed to using multiple calendars at the same time. One thing you've mentioned though is Lent, and that's falling on Wednesday, the 18th of February 2026 this year. And that's an incredible coincidence because that's the same date that Muslims around the world will be going out looking for the new crescent moon, which will mark the beginning of Ramadan. Now, this is like once in a lifetime coincidence, so it's really, really special. And I wanted to note that Ramadan is a month of fasting, and how Ramadan is spoken about in the Quran has this interfaith element. The Quran states that fasting has been prescribed as a practice for the Muslim community, just as it was prescribed as a practice for those religious communities that came before the Muslims. So when Muslims fast Ramadan, we're keenly aware that this is a practice that the Hindu community and the Buddhist community may participate in, but of course the Abrahamic communities, the Christian community and the Jewish community. So I think it's special this year that Ramadan and Lent are coinciding. Lent, of course, is famous for abstaining from something, food or otherwise. And it's an opportunity, I think, for these communities, Muslim and Christian, and the wider religious and non-religious community to reflect on these ancient spiritual practices and what relevance they continue to play in our life today.
I think that's brilliant, yeah. And it's so fascinating that different cultures have chosen to abstain, have chosen to think about a period of spiritual purification. In Christianity, this number 40 days seems to be important. It appears in various parts of Christian writings and before that Jewish writings. And that period, which is give or take about the same as a month, is clearly really important for some reason. Seems to be a good length of time to really get into something, a spiritualizing, a purification practice like fasting. And as you say, it's really fascinating coincidence. I mean, even less than once in a lifetime, because it's only happening exactly at this time because of precisely when Easter falls, because of course the relationship between the Sunday and the full moon is a very flexible one. But it's interesting you talk about that kind of process of comparison and contestation that takes place, because even the Gregorian calendar that we have was a reform, was an updating of the old Julian calendar, because it was observed that the year was fractionally too long. Putting a leap year in every 4 years was a little bit too much. So they had to remove 3 leap years every 400 years in order to get it to line up with the precise, or as close as possible, precise length of the solar cycle. And it's fascinating to watch that process of increasing precision, where different contested approaches to the calendar are refined and are compared. And I gather there's a kind of similar process of contestation in the Islamic calendar approach?
Absolutely. There's a process of contestation which is actually the topic of my PhD research within the UK. And that very much has to do with the history of Muslims in the UK. The Muslim community in the UK are in the majority of migrant backgrounds. Like my father, he came from Bangladesh. And when Muslims first arrived in the UK, they did try and conduct their own Islamic calendar here in the UK, meaning they went out and looked for the crescent moon. But they experienced a problem in the UK that perhaps they didn't always experience from the warmer climes from which they came, which is the British weather. They would go out and look for the crescent month after month, and they couldn't see the moon. And I've actually, during the process of my research, read some very charming letters that migrants have written, say, to India, saying, we're looking for the moon and we can't see it, we don't know what to do. And they came up with some alternative solutions. And the alternative solution, which is most followed currently in the UK, is to outsource the moon sighting to a different country. So Mosque A might follow the country Morocco, Mosque B might follow South Africa, Mosque C might follow Turkey, Mosque D might follow Bangladesh, Mosque E might follow Saudi Arabia, and so on and so forth. But each of these countries might see the crescent on a different date, and some of these countries might have a different method. They might not even look for the crescent, because there have been other calendar methods used in these different countries. So as long as Muslims in the UK are outsourcing their calendar to different countries abroad, it's inevitable, therefore, that within the UK we have this conflict. And during the course of my research, I began to challenge this notion, wondering, is it actually that cloudy in the UK? And part of my public engagement work has been to train Muslims in astronomy to see if they can observe the moon in the UK. And you know what? We can. We can see the moon in the UK, but we do need to work together. This means sometimes we might see the moon here in Cambridge, but we won't see it in Cornwall or Cardiff. But another month we'll see the moon in London, but it will be cloudy in the north. But in this way, when the community work together, they can have a perfectly functional, viable Islamic lunar visibility calendar here in the UK, just like they've had everywhere else in the world, you know, for over 1,000 years or 1,400 years of Islam. And of course, the lunar visibility calendar is ancient. It predates Islam. So part of my research is about understanding the disputes, but part of my public engagement is thinking about how we can resolve the disputes. And I do that through offering training in astronomy. And one of the projects we've been working on here in Cambridge University, together with the Divinity Faculty, Interfaith Program, Institute of Astronomy, and Leeds University, is a program called Moon Sighters Academy. And that's where we bring together astronomers from Leeds and Cambridge University, together with some of the social sciences research that we have about the calendar and disputes surrounding the calendar, together with community leaders in the Muslim community, to upskill them in astronomy and hopefully to build the next generation of moon sighting leaders so that they can go back to their own communities and set up a vibrant network of lunar observation hubs. And I hope that in the future one day we can have this network of moon sighters around the country to restore the meaning of the calendar, what it is to me. It's a community connection to one another and a communal connection to the cosmos.
That's really fascinating. It's so interesting to hear how these debates, scientific debates, but also religious debates, can divide communities, but also these conversations can bring communities together and provide opportunities for communities to interact. And so interesting to hear how these kind of ancient issues, these ancient debates, are also live issues. I mean, the question of the dating of Easter has remained a problem. Even today, in today's broadly secular British society, there's a whole question about, you know, when should we have Easter? Because actually it's quite inconvenient for a lot of people because our school holidays, our university holidays have to move. They might be as early, Easter Sunday might be as early as 22nd of March. It might be as late as the middle of April. And that causes problems for people. But that goes way back. Martin Luther, the great Reformation scholar and Protestant reformer in the early 16th century, was arguing that we should have a fixed date of Easter. And the League of Nations in the early 20th century was arguing we should have a fixed date of Easter. And people might not be aware, actually there's a law on the UK statute book that we should have a fixed date of Easter as soon as the churches can agree. But the churches have never managed to agree. And even though they do actually agree in principle that there should be a fixed date of Easter, there's not been enough kind of political will to make it happen. and to agree on when that date should be. So people might be aware that Easter is still celebrated on different dates in different parts of the Christian community, and that just goes to show how much these calendar differences, these differences in observation, really mean to people, but also how much the decisions and the thinking about these things depend not just on astronomy or on religious belief, but also on custom, on practice, on habit, on tradition, and on political decisions as well.
Absolutely.
So Imad, we're recording this just before the start of Ramadan 2026. So would you mind explaining to our viewers how they can sight the new crescent moon for themselves?
Absolutely, I'd love to. So the new crescent moon for Ramadan will be visible on Wednesday, the 18th of February 2026. And it's very, very easy to see. All you'll need is a clear view of the sunset, and then you'll have to wait maybe about 20 minutes and you'll see that splendid thin crescent moon emerge somewhere near the sunset. And if you're in the northern hemisphere, it will emerge slightly to the left of the sunset. But if you're in the southern hemisphere, it might emerge somewhere to the right of the sunset. But wherever you are, please go and look for the crescent on Wednesday, the 18th of February, because I promise you, when you see the crescent, and if you see the crescent, it's going to be a wonderful experience. It will be the thinnest crescent you'll ever see.